Well, as we enter a crucial part of the season, guys, with only 12 to 13 games left to go, including that massive game against Hearts on Saturday and obviously the big game on Wednesday away at Rugby Park. All the talk is seemingly recently on, let's look ahead. What have we got? The fact that Clement wants to rotate his squad, doesn't he? That's very much his intent, is to rotate. And the more players he has available, the more he can rotate and the better options Rangers have. Some of the worry is always when you rotate your team a great deal, you can cause a bit of unsettlement there. You can cause players perhaps not to play to their highest ability because of the fact that some players like to have a run of games where they play game after game after game. And we're certainly seeing that with some, like the John Lundströms, Connor Goldsons, James Cavagniers, Jack Butlands of this world. However, obviously certain other positions are being regularly rotated. Midfield role has been regularly rotated. Alongside John Lundstrom, wing role has been rotated, centre forward role been rotated at the moment solely between Fabio Silva and Cyril Dessers. Now, I don't know about you guys, but Fabio Silva for me is probably the better of the two in terms of his talent, in terms of his raw talent. The guy is better. He works the whole back four. He doesn't stand up there. He has a better first touch. He holds the ball up better. He gets involved in play better. He's just an all-round better player than Cyril Dessers. Dessers, yes, has scored 14 goals or whatever it is this season, but at times he really does worry me. And even the most ardent Cyril Dessers fan has to admit that, that at times his misses are very, very concerning. I mean, take, for example, in that game against Celtic where he wants 500 million touches before he shoots. Of course, he doesn't get them, and it all comes tumbling down. And then, of course, in the last game against St Johnstone, again, the chances that he misses in that are just quite incredible. That is the real worry for me over Cyril Dessers and his future at the club in terms of those chances he misses. So, the more forwards and the more attacking players we can get back, the better. Now, injury updates have emerged on Kieran Dowell, on Mr. Chocolate, Mr. Glass himself, Kemar Roofe, also on Abdallah Sima, and on Danilo and Zach Lovelace as well. All players that, down the stretch, having back would be exceptionally useful for. Well, let's start off by talking about this trio. And, look, you look at this trio there. You look at those players, Abdallah, you've got Kemar, and obviously Danilo, players who have undoubtedly got a lot of skill, players who have undoubtedly got an awful lot to contribute to this team. And if we can get them fit and get them back and get them firing, really would have a real lift on this team going into the end of the season. Now, whilst the injury outlooks on Danilo and Kemar Roofe are certainly looking better than they perhaps were previously reported, the injury outlook for Abdallah Sima is still very much looking towards the end of the season. So what do we know about Kemar? What do we know about Danilo? And what do we know about Abdallah Sima? Well, Kemar Roofe, obviously, Kemar Roofe is probably one of the most frustrating players we'll ever see play in a Rangers shirt in terms of talent against the availability. This lad is a quality player. He is a player who is probably arguably one of the best finishers at the club. During title season 55, he was the top scorer, and he scored vital goals. I mean, take for instance the goal that he scored in Betis to win us that game and take us through to the knockout stage, which obviously the draw happens tomorrow. This season he's got one goal in 9 appearances in the Scottish Premier League. In fact, obviously last season, again, a very ruined one by injury, only 1 goal in 3 appearances. Previously, though, 10 in 21, 14 in 24, very good performances there. Europa League, 3 goals, 1 appearance, 1 assist, 2 goal contributions in 3 games. He is a guy who can contribute when fit, but keeping him fit is the major issue. And we saw the frustration in Kemar when he was taken off that time when he was injured previously. Now, according to the latest reports coming out of the club, Kemar Roofe is destined to return early March, which obviously, given the fact we are now on the 22nd of February and the end of February is but 6 days away, that could say that Roofe will be back and available at least for those games in March. Now, if we look at the games that Rangers have got coming up in March, that would certainly obviously give us an extra option. We'll turn to those games in a moment after I give you the next piece of injuries. Look, I know that when he comes back, he's not going to walk into the team. He's not going to start because that's not Philippe Clement's style. When he gets a player back, he likes to bring him back off the bench, to slowly reintroduce him, to get him back and playing, which is very much the sensible option. And we've seen with Tom Lawrence and Ryan Jack, haven't we, how he's managed the returns of these players where they've played one game, then completely rested the next, then played the next, or played a part in the next game. And I think that's very much the approach he's going to take with all the 3 of these players once they return from injury. So good news for Kemar Roofe Danilo is also expected to return in March, which goes against the April diagnosis that was given previously. Danilo's recuperation from his injuries obviously going better than was first expected. So, I mean, that is a miracle in itself at Rangers. We all know that, you know, given the fact that Rangers medical staff, I don't know, as one commenter once joked, put bandages on with nail guns. It seems that, you know, the Rangers player goes out injured for a couple of weeks and then 6 months later he's still out injured. You've got to question what the medical staff are doing. But it now seems that Danilo is ahead of schedule, and he also will be available in March. Now, if you look into March, some of those fixtures coming up in March, obviously we have Motherwell start off with. I think that game will come way too early for both Danilo and for Ruth. But maybe more realistically, the 10th of March, Scottish Cup quarter-final against Hibernian at Easter Road could be an option. The 17th of March, the Saturday, against away at Dens Park. Before obviously the next home game, which is against Hibernian on the 30th of March. So certainly for one of those two Hibs games and obviously the Dundee game as well, we may have Danilo and Ruth back. Now, what is more encouraging, obviously, is having Danilo and Ruth back before the start of April. Obviously, the 7th of April is the next Old Firm game at Ibrox, and you know, if we can go into that next Old Firm game with Danilo fit, with Ruth fit, Dessers fit, and Silva fit, it gives us a great deal of options to really put out there and put that lot across the city under the cosh and put them under severe pressure. As for Abdallah Sima, well, he still is looking like an early April return. Probably it won't be ready for that game against Celtic on the 7th, but certainly Ross County away, which is the last before the pre-split fixtures on the 13th, is a realistic return date for Kemar. So having for Abdallah, sorry. So having Abdallah Sima back for the post-split fixtures again is going to be a major lift for the club. And if we can keep all three of these players fit, and I know with Kemar Roof, that is a massive ask. But you know, if we can have these three players all back, all fit, all firing, ready to go, early March, early April, and then obviously post-split, they're still all there. I mean, obviously, I think, you know, out of the three of them, you're probably going to say that Kemar Roof is the most unlikely to be there, given his past injury history. You know, the chances of him getting re-injured are very high indeed. Now, another player where again, who has had a fitness update delivered on is Kieran Dowell. Now, obviously, Kieran was injured during the training camp, obviously really bad because Kieran had played really, really well pre-winter break. He'd played in that role alongside John Lundstrom very well. He'd come on and play the 10 role for Cantwell a couple of times, done really well. And he really seemed to be finding some form again and doing really, really well. And it was a real shame that he got injured. Kieran was getting back to form. After all of those rumours that he would be shipped out in January, the fact that he returned, that Philippe Clement put his faith in him, maybe out of necessity rather than desire to do it, he came back and he played really well. Now we never really knew what the whole extent with his injury was. There was a lot of talk about, well, he's something to do with his foot got caught in the grass on that horrible pitch out in La Manga, and he got injured and he twisted and turned, and we didn't really know what the issue was. Well, apparently, according to reports in the media today, he had a hernia injury, and obviously had to have that operated on. Having had a hernia myself, I know you do have to have those operated on. And he is now in line to return in March as well. So again, it really does look like we're getting players back and getting players back at the right time to give us a lift. Now, I know that realistically they're going to get Cameron Carter-Horse-Vickers back, and Hatate will be back as well towards the end of March. But these players that we're getting back obviously give us just as much as lift as they're getting. The fact that Seymour will be back in April, the fact that it looks like Ruth, Danilo, and Dowell will all return in March is obviously excellent news for the club. Now, another player who is on a line to return is Zach Lovelace. Now, we saw Zach play a part in that St Mirren game away during Stephen Davis's tenure as the Rangers manager. And Zach played on the wing and was very, very impressive indeed, played exceptionally well. And for 45 minutes, or near 45 minutes, he looked absolutely superb, didn't he? He really did. He was lively, he was exciting, he went at players, he attacked. He really did, provide a real spark out there, something that at that stage of the season, pre-Philippe Clement was really missing. Now, Rangers obviously were criticised for not signing a striker in January. Well, I suppose Silva was the striker. But I think, with the news, obviously, that Danilo is back now, back in March, that Roof is back in March. It was a case of, I think, getting through with what we had to then get these guys back and in reckoning. Now, one player apparently who is going to get an opportunity to impress, apparently, is Zach Lovelace. Now, apparently he is in Philippe Clement's thoughts. You know, how do we know that he's in Philippe Clement's thoughts? Well, Philippe Clement basically said it himself when he was asked about Zach Lovelace. This is what Philippe Clement had to say when he was questioned about Zach Lovelace in a press conference, when obviously Zach is online to return. He said, "We have Zach Lovelace, also who was out injured. I've not seen him live with me, but I saw him before, and he is somebody with a bright future. So you can maybe 6 or 7 strikers, but you cannot play them all." So, you know, Clement certainly seems to think that he has a very, very good options going forward. Now, Zach Lovelace has played B team games already. He played in that Carlisle friendly game, which ended 1-1, and he is now available. Now, it remains to be seen, obviously, when Philippe Clement will bleed him into the first team, if he's going to. Now, it does seem from the comments that Clement has made that Zach Lovelace will get the opportunity to impress at some point. Zach Lovelace was talked about the fact that, talked also about the fact that he is ready to come back. And he talked about how he was preparing to come back. And this is what Zach had to say. He said after playing, he said, "It was good. I had to just get myself mentally ready to start again and I kind of push on to where I was before. It feels good, man. Not really anything has caused a problem with my recovery. I am just trying to get myself back to where I used to be, get myself to my sharpness. I still have a couple of things to iron out, but I'll be getting back soon, hopefully. Hopefully I'll get 60 against Dundee and then push on from there to get the 90 the game after." This was talking about the B team football that was upcoming. Now, it'd be great news if Zach Lovelace at some point could be brought back into the team and could feature. I think, coming off the bench, he's certainly someone that could provide some impact. And then obviously twinned with the fact that we can hopefully get Danilo and Roof back in March. All good. I mean, like I said, if we can go into March and then into April with Zach Lovelace, Dessers, Silva, Roof and Danilo, and then we go post-split with Seema, Dessers, Silva, Danilo, Zach Lovelace, Kemar Roof, all back in. It just gives the manager so many options. And, with obviously the Europa League coming up as well, those ties in March, the 5th and the 12th, or it could be the 7th. I can't remember when it is now. The 6th and the 13th, maybe ring a bell. But you know what? It could well be, that there is a real opportunity there for all these players to play a part in the run into the end of the season, and it will give Rangers a huge lift. And look, I know this is an overused saying, isn't it? But it's kind of like new signings almost. The length of time that these guys have been out, in particular Danilo and Seema when he comes back in April. And Lovelace, obviously, who's been out since that Mirren game, they are kind of like new signings, new players that we've had to get used to not having, and then they come back into the team. Now, obviously, it will take them time to settle in. Any getting back to first team football does take time for you to settle in and for you to get back your match legs under you, so to speak. 4 to 6 weeks, I've heard from some footballers. Obviously, it depends on the football. It depends on that footballer's body and his recovery rates and his fitness rate, etc., etc. But with Philippe Clement, the way that he manages the recovery of players, as we've seen with both Tom Lawrence and Ryan Jack, I'm fully confident that he can have these players back, these 4 players back, 5 players if you count Kieran Dowell, all fit and firing by at least mid-March, which will give us great options going in towards the end of the season and enable us to keep the pressure on at that lot from across the city, until the very end of the season. Whatever it is, however we look at this now, as much as we might not want to admit it, this title race is going to go down to the wire, in my opinion. You could even be facing another helicopter Sunday, realistically, looking at how this season pans out towards the end, with them getting players back as well. I hope it doesn't. I hope we can, just romp away from here and they will fall apart. That's the hope of every Rangers fan, isn't it? But, the realistic football head on you, which, I hate having to have as a Rangers fan. Like I said, I'd rather they collapse and we just run away with it. The realistic football head on me tells me this could well go down to the wire. But having these players back is a huge advantage for the club. Well, guys, let me know what you think in the comments down below and your hopes for the future. Thanks for watching Glasgow Rangers Nation, guys. As always, please smash that sub and help the channel to keep on growing. And there's 2 jobs I always ask of you on the way out. Number 1 is to smash the like, and number 2 is always to remember, please never forget, we are the people.